Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dave Beattie. I'm the Legislative Compliance Manager at HR Talk. I'll be doing the first part of this morning's webinar with the lovely Harusha Naidu. She'll be doing IOD claims a bit later on. As I said, I'm the Legislative Compliance Manager. I've got 25 years experience in the PAYE, UIF, SDL, and COID space. I've got a wonderful backup team who actually do the COID returns, and if you need any assistance, those are the people that I'm going to refer you to after the webinar. But in the meantime, let's get cracking. Okay, so what does COID stand for? COID stands for Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Diseases, otherwise known as Workman's Compensation. Most people would know it as Workman's Compensation. What is the purpose of COID? Okay, let's take a little step back. Any business employing their first employee effectively has 7 working days to put in a COID registration. Now, in our experience in the industry, very few companies even know about Workman's Compensation. You'll be shocked how many registrations we do with companies having been trading for more than 10 years. So it's obviously a shock to their system, and it's a shock when they hear what risk they were under by realizing that they did not register within 7 working days of registering their first employee. Bearing in mind that 1 employee is not so much risk, 100 employees increases your risk of issues happening. So COID provides compensation to cover employees who get injured on duty, disabled, or die, so in a work-related accident, or they contract a disease that they might have got in their work environment. Maybe a good example is asbestosis for people who have been working in mines or working in properties that have old asbestos roofs. So those would be good examples. Who cannot apply for COID? Okay, now you cannot apply for COID if you do not have 1 employee, okay, who's not a director or shareholder. Now that can be slightly misleading because often those directors and those directors particularly are actually working directors. So in the case of a working director, I would suggest registering for COID. If you're a sole trader and you have no employees working for you, you do not fall into the COID net, unfortunately. But there's lots of sole traders out there who are trading and have employees working for them. So the employer would, as the sole trader, would be required to register for COID to cover those employees working for them. Unfortunately, they themselves would not be covered. What is a CF registration number? Okay, so CF registration number is effectively the employer reference number for COID. This number is the number that you receive once you've had a successful registration. As I said, it's called the CF number, and it starts with a 99, 3 zeros, and then 7 unique numbers, obviously for your registration. Now, over the years, 99 had 4 zeros after it, but with the number of registrations now, it's 3 zeros. Do you have to register each company for COID, whether it's a branch, okay, or not? Now, effectively, any entity that is a registered legal entity, anything that has got a CF or CM registration number with a CRPC would be required to register as an employer having a separate COID registration number. What form should be used to complete this COID registration? The registration form is a WAS2, but if you look at my second point, we've now got a second class of registration, and that registration is for domestic employers. For those of you who are not aware, the legislation changed in November of 2020 to include domestics in the definition of employee for COID. Now, it's a long time coming, and the court case went on for many years. But in November, the highest court in the land stated that a domestic is an employee for COID purposes. They would have to be included, and proclaimed that any claims for COID could go back to 1994. So to register your domestic, you would fill in the CF1E form. Now, there's a lot of confusion over this because it's a new registration. Whilst the legislation came in November 2020, the people that I work with suggest that you register your employee as of 1 March 2021. So registration 1 March 2021 would mean you'd pay a provisional assessment now, and then your first return of earnings for that domestic would go in March, April, May of 2022. There are lots of outstanding questions that the Compensation Commissioner hasn't come back to us on regarding the registration of domestics. We have done quite a lot of the registrations already, but there's a lot of people who contact us on a daily basis saying, but I only have my domestic for 6 hours a month, 1 day a week. At present, the legislation is not specific as to how many hours the person worked before they have to register. If you've got a domestic working in your home who could be injured, who could be sick as a result of that work environment, you have to register for workman's compensation, submit a return. Unfortunately, that comes with a lot of extra stress, and we've noted that the compliance in the UIF registration is bad, and we anticipate that the compliance in the workman's compensation registration place is going to be even worse. So if you do have a domestic, I suggest filling in the CF1E, attaching the supporting documentation, sending it in, because the registration process takes ages. My next point is, should the application be done online? You can do it online. Obviously, if you are successful online, getting the registration confirmation back, doing the return of earnings, and doing any letter of good standing is easy. But unfortunately, the Compensation Commissioner's Office and their systems are not very user-friendly, and we have decided to utilize a third-party service provider based in Johannesburg to do the registrations on our behalf. We guaranteed the registration to be done within a certain time. Whilst obviously there's a fee attached to that, we know that it's done right, and we know that you're going to get your provisional assessment and your letter of good standing timelessly. There are other organizations that certain entities can register for workman's compensation with. Not everyone has to submit their registration to COID. And one of those is Rand Mutual Assurance. Rand Mutual Assurance deals mainly deals only in class 4, mining, and class 8, iron, steel, metal, and related industries. Now, when dealing with RMA, I need to clarify one thing. You do need to register with COID. You then submit a separate registration to the RMA. They're a lot more efficient than COID themselves, and they do a lot of training around the country on changes in legislation. So if you are in that industry, just attend the seminars if you can. The other one is the Federated Employers Mutual Assurance Company, FEM. That is an organization that's licensed to deal with workmen's compensation in the construction industry. So it's pretty limited. So the majority of people would fall into the general COID category. Now I'm going to discuss COID subclasses and the rate that you pay. Now, over the years, COID have had literally 30, 40 subclasses. They are refining that as we go along. But essentially, on on your registration form, it is critical that you put a clear indication what your business does. Do not abbreviate things. Do not generalize. You must be very, very clear, because that notification is going to decide which subclass and subsequently which rate COID are going to apply to you. Being put in a subclass that has a higher risk than what you do is going to cost you a lot of money. I've just done quite a few registrations where we believe that COID have put the manufacturing companies into the wrong category and the admin holding office into the wrong category. So, as I mentioned, a mistake at that point can cost you a lot of money. It's critical that if you do a registration, that if it comes back and you're not happy with that subclass, that you query it immediately. Once time goes by, COID are reticent to make changes because they think that you're trying to steal from them. So make sure that you are very, very clear and that you go into the right subclass. Sometimes it's not so easy, for the simple reason that the subclasses do not have exact services that you may provide. So COID, in their wisdom, will put you into a category that they think that you belong. Now, sometimes the level of, or the quality of person doing this registration process might not be so great, and they might not understand your business. So make sure that that's right. Now, your subclasses have been explained. Now you've got a rate. Each subclass has a rate, and that rate is dependent on the risk of injury or illness in that particular subclass. Now, as an example, a company that does mining or building would be in a significantly higher rate to an entity that does general administration, ad hoc administration type services. So, as I mentioned, don't just accept the rates. Look at the subclasses, look at the rates, and make sure that upfront you're in the right category. Making changes takes a long time, but it's worth it if you look at the cost over a period of time. Now, at the end of each year of assessment, you obviously have to pay your COID liability, which I will explain a bit later. But in essence, your COID liability is calculated by multiplying that risk rate, the percentage that COID have given you, by your COID earnings for the period. I'll explain COID earnings shortly. What is included in COID earnings? So I've just got some bullets there. You can see I've included salaries and wages, cost of living allowances, bonuses and incentives, regular overtime payments, very important, regular, guaranteed 13th check, housing allowances, commission paid in addition to basic pay, the cash value of meals and accommodation, and any other payments in accordance with the employee's contract of service. Now, as you can see, those are all guaranteed regular earnings. Okay, if you were to be sick, what would you want benefits paid on? You would want them paid on your regular earnings. What is excluded from COID earnings? Reimburse of subsistence allowances, reimburse of travel allowances, occasional overtime, ex gratia payments, occasional payments, company contributions to medical aid and retirement funds, and non-recurring payments that fall outside the employee's normal duties. So the common thread there is these are all payments that change, they're not regular. Reimburse of subsistence, reimburse of travel is not remuneration, you're just being reimbursed for expenses. So should you make a claim, why would you get benefits based on those? Ex gratia payments is also once-off payments. Your medical aid and retirement contributions paid by your company are fringe benefits. They're not remuneration for COID purposes, though. And then you can see non-recurring payments, anything that falls outside the employee's fixed remuneration. Is there an annual COID earnings threshold per person? Yes, there is. Every year, the Minister of Employment and Labour publishes in the Gazette the COID earnings threshold, and you'll see that for the current year, which is the 2021 year of assessment, this threshold is 506,473 per annum. This means that the maximum COID earnings applicable to an employee is that figure of 506,473. So when it comes to doing your COID return of earnings at the end of the year, you would rely on your payroll system to generate COID reports of COID earnings. Now, you don't take your total earnings because a lot of people earn over 506,000. So your COID system is in your payroll is set up for you to put your COID rates in and for the payroll system to do COID reports, which is a provision effectively of what your final assessment is going to be. It calculates the earnings in which COID is going to be applicable. So which earnings effectively that rate is going to be applied to. As I said, it's important that it's be put into the payroll, because if it's not put into the payroll, you're not going to have COID reports. And as I also said, your COID reports are used to calculate your annual return of earnings. I'm going to briefly chat now about your provisional return of earnings for COID. And this provisional return of earnings happens at the beginning of your COID life cycle. In other words, once you've done your COID registration and you've got your number, the Compensation Commissioner will generate an assessment based on the COID earnings that you have listed on your COID registration application form. So as I said, it's only a provision. This provision applies those COID earnings by the rate, and you have 30 days to pay the liability that's raised. I have been told by the person that I use to do registrations that too many companies overestimate their anticipated COID earnings and then have a situation where they're paying this massive amount of money to COID up front, and then there's only a reconciliation and correction when you submit your annual return of earnings in March, April, May of the next year. So he suggests that this is not overestimated, that you go conservative, so that, you know, if things change during the year, the correction doesn't mean that you're waiting for a refund 6 months after your annual return of earnings. Your annual return of earnings, the legislation says this must be in before the 31st of March yearly, but in all the years that I've worked with Workman's Compensation, this has been 31 May. All employers have to submit a return of earnings on a WAS-8 form. So as I said to you, at the end of the year, for the period March to February, you would take your COID reports as per your payroll, which hopefully have limited earnings for those people who have earned over 506,000. And you would put those figures into this form, and you would declare how many employees you had in that period, and then you would make a declaration as to what you anticipate your next year's COID earnings to be. An assessment is raised, and obviously because you've paid a provisional assessment early in the year, you would have that amount deducted off this final assessment, and there would either be a small amount to pay in or there would be a refund. Like the provisional assessment, this has to be paid within 30 days. Is there a minimum assessment value? There is. Section 83(1) of the COID Act specifies this minimum, and this minimum changes annually. So watch out for government gazettes in this place. The current minimum fee is 1284, and that applies to general COID assessments. I do the COID return for a body corporate, and we've got one cleaner, and every year I end up having to pay the minimum fee because the actual assessment value is lower than that. Now, when domestics were added to the definition of employee, we were very concerned that the minimum fee, as I mentioned, 1284, would be applied. But a couple of weeks ago, the Compensation Commissioner issued a government gazette saying that the minimum fee is 381 Rand. Now, in the COID registrations I've done, 381 Rand is a pretty representative value for a domestic working a couple of days, 3-4 days a month at the minimum wage over the year. So we're grateful for the 381. In the last example I saw, I think my client owed 9 Rand effectively. His assessment was 9 Rand less than the 381, so it's not a problem. It is important to note that if the employer's accident costs, in other words, claims against the fund, are higher than others in the subclass, your yearly assessment fee may increase. I haven't seen that, but I also haven't worked with an entity where there's been massive claims during the year. Letters of good standing are becoming more and more important. Who needs a letter of good standing? Basically, any employer should every year, on completion of and payments of the return of earnings, ask for a letter of good standing. This letter of good standing is more and more required in tendering and doing business with certain governments and semi-government organizations. So it's always a good idea to have that on hand. As I've said below, the tenders is the main space. And it also shows that you're in good standing so that if there are any claims for injuries, there will be no challenges. The most important reason for being in good standing and registered is that you are protected by workman's compensation against any claims from employees for injuries that happen on duty. Possibly the biggest risk that my clients have, those ones who refuse to be registered for workman's comp, is that if there was an injury or an illness and there was a multi-million rand claim, there could, in terms of the law, be a claim against the company for such injuries. Having a workman's compensation registration takes that off the table immediately. Do you have to apply for these letters every year? Yes, you do. The letter of good standing is only applicable until the next return of earnings is due. So just get into the habit of, as soon as you've submitted your return of earnings and you've made your payments, get your logs or letter of good standing immediately. So how does COID work? Yeah, we've basically covered some of this. It's effectively an insurance, government-based insurance that covers the employer for any injuries, illnesses, diseases that the employee might pick up in the workplace. Obviously, they provide certain minimum benefits, which we're going to chat to later, but those basically include obviously covering your lost wages, lump sums, and the payments of medical care. Yeah, what they don't say in the legislation is that a lot of medical facilities do not accept workman's compensation cases for the simple reason that it takes too long for them to get their money from those entities. So I am aware that in the Durban region, St. Augustine's Hospital and Shanghai Hospital are the two that would allow workman's comp cases. Okay, so what does COID workman's compensation cover? It covers both the employee and the employer, no matter whose fault it is. And as I mentioned a minute ago, the employee cannot sue the employer as workman's compensation covers these types of issues. So what does it cover? First of all, it covers medical costs, all reasonable medical costs, including hospitalization, doctors, specialists, medicine. Whilst the legislation does say the employee is free to choose the service provider, that would be foolhardy. If you've lost a hand, going to a facility that are not going to accept you. So, it's always good to know who would accept you. All the medical accounts are submitted to the commissioner. Every single year, there's the tariffs paid. It's quite a long process showing you all the various categories of injuries and what the tariffs are and what would be paid. So always a good idea to familiarize yourself with that. And lastly, there's no co-payments levied on such admissions. Temporary disability is effectively when the employee is unable to work or is only able to do limited work because of a disease or injury. Obviously, the temporary nature means that they'll be able to return to work in due course. To claim, the employee would need to be booked off by a doctor for more than 3 days. If you're booked off work for longer than 3 days, you'll get paid out the whole time that you're off, including those first 3 days. I think the 3 days is just to limit the number of claims that go into the system for frivolous cuts and bruises. If the employee can't work at all, they'll get 75% of their normal monthly or weekly wage tax-free. This is known as the days off or income replacement benefits. If the employee can only do some of their work, they'll still get paid some wages by the employer. The fund will pay the 75% of the difference between what they get paid and what they would have been paid before the injury. An employee can claim compensation for disability for 1 year. This can be extended though, and the compensation commissioner will be arbiter of that, and they can decide whether this temporary illness injury is now actually leading towards permanent, and then they would grant compensation based on permanent disability. For the first 3 months of work, the employer must pay the employee compensation every month. The employer can claim that money back from the compensation commissioner though. After 3 months, the compensation commissioner takes over the payments until the employee is fit to return to work. For an occupational disease, the employee must be paid at the wage at the time of diagnosis and not on not at the time that the employee acquired. It might be quite a big disparity in that wages of the time that this process took. If the employee is unemployed, the wage to be used would be employed. Permanent disability is an injury or illness that the employee has losing both your arms or legs. The seriousness of the disability will determine whether the employee will never be able to work again. The disability is rated from 100% to 1%, depending on the severity of the illness or disability. For example, 100% would be the loss of both hands or sight. And if you lost your small toe, it would just be disability. So, a report on the disability and the commission would be awarded. Bearing in mind that it's good to look at your job to see the injury type and benefits. If the disability, 30% disability, employee will get paid a monthly pension. The size of the pension depends on what earnings were and on seriousness of the disability. If they have 100% disability, though, they'll get paid 75% of their COID earnings. With less serious disabilities, the Commissioner will work out the monthly payments, and the employee will be paid that payment for the rest of their life. If the disability is less than 30%, the employee would qualify for a lump sum, and that's a once-off payment. Death benefits. If an employee is killed on duty, the family can claim from the fund, and I've listed the benefits below. There's a once-off lump sum payable to the spouse, which is equated to 2 months compensation benefits. There's a monthly pension to the spouse, which is 40% of the employee's monthly wage. The monthly pension to the children is 20% of the monthly pension until they achieve 18 years of age. And there's a once-off funeral benefit, which is adjusted by COID via notification in the Government Gazette annually. The children mentioned include illegitimate, adopted, and stepchildren. If there's no spouse or children, other dependents like parents will be paid compensation. Additional benefits. If an employee is injured, dies, or contracts any occupational disease, and they're under the age of 26, they qualify for extra compensation. This extra compensation claim has to be submitted within 24 months of the injury. Now, that's me. I'm going to hand over to Harusha. Harusha is one of our HR seniors, and she's got more than 10 years experience in the HR place. She will take over and deal with the occupational injury and the reporting thereof. Welcome, Harusha.
Thank you, Dave. Good morning, everyone. And thank you for joining the webinar with us this morning. So I'm just going to take you through the definitions of an injury on duty and occupational disease. So an injury on duty is an unexpected occurrence at a specific date, time, and place, and arising out of and in the course of the employee's employment, resulting in a personal injury or death, or when an occupational disease is contracted due to exposure at the workplace. The fund pays compensation to permanent and casual workers, trainees, and apprentices who are injured or contract a disease in the course of their work and lose income as a result. Okay, who is eligible to claim? So anyone that's permanently employed, a domestic worker in a boarding house or employed in a business setup, an apprentice or trainee farm worker, or a worker paid by a labor agency. You cannot claim if you're a member of the South African National Defence Force, a member of the South African Police Service, a worker who doesn't work under the control of an employer, for example, a subcontractor. Employees are in the employ of the subcontractor are covered. A worker who worked outside South Africa for more than 12 months without entering into an agreement with the Director General of the Department of Labor, or anyone found guilty of willful misconduct, unless you are seriously disabled or killed. Also note, if you as an employee, if an employee die from a work-related disease or injury, your dependents can claim from the fund. Compensation benefits will not be paid if you reported the accident to an employee more than 12 months after the accident or death, or after the disease was diagnosed. You are off work for 3 days or less, or when the fund will only pay medical expenses. The accident resulted from your own negligence or wrongdoing, unless you are seriously disabled or die in an accident, then the fund will still pay compensation, or you are unreasonably refused or willfully neglect to have medical treatment. Okay, the COID, the reporting and claims process, this is a list of requirements for the complete claims that you made to compensation. So the employee must report the injury to their direct line manager or supervisor immediately. The employer must report the accident or disease to the compensation commissioner within 7 days of an injury or 14 days after knowing of the occupational disease. Workers must get the WCI-2 or WCI-1 form from the employer and take it with them to the doctor. So when an injury happened, the employer has to complete the WCI-2 form, hand it to the employee, which the employee takes to the doctor or nearest hospital for treatment. The form must be completed by the doctor and must be handed back to the employer. Reason being, this is one of the forms that we use to begin the claim process. The doctor must send a first medical report, which is the WCI-CL4 form. It's detailing the disease or injury and the likely period that the employee will be off work. So that's also required to be attached to the WCI-2. The employer must send the first medical report to the commissioner. So as mentioned, when you start the claim process, it's attached to the WCI-2 form as to refer to how serious the injury is and how long the employee will be off work. The employee must keep copies of the employee's report, records of evidence, witnesses, and all notices sent to the commissioner. The doctor must also send progress medical reports, which is your WCL5, monthly while treatment is progressing. The doctor must send a final medical report stating either that the employee is fit to return to work or that employee is permanently disabled. The employer sends the final medical report to the commissioner. So as the claim is progressing or has the employee is seeking treatment, you will get your first medical report, you get progress medical reports, and your final medical report, which needs to be attached to the claim. And I'll take you through that shortly. The employer sends a resumption report, which is a WCL6 to the commissioner when the employee starts to work again. The employer also fills in this form to claim back the compensation money that the employer paid to the worker during the first 3 months that they were off. Once the compensation commissioner's office has all the forms, they will make payment. This process may take months though. Okay, just documents required for reporting injury duty. So this is just in the first instance that you're registering and your first documents required to begin the claim. So you will need a duly completed employee's report of an accident, which I mentioned is the WCI-2. You can have that electronic or manual. Now they're doing it, we're doing online, so it will be electronic. If an employee decides to actually go to the Department of Labor to hand this in, then you will have to have it done manually. A valid identity, which is certified, and information issued by the Department of Home Affairs, including foreigners, identity document, driver's license, passport, birth certificate, work permit. Relevant questionnaires related to the specific injury, if and where applicable. Example, if it was an assault, then there's an assault questionnaire that you need to complete. If it was dealing with transport, then there's a transport questionnaire, which is available on the Department of Labor website that you can download and complete that. The first medical report, which is a WCI-4, a valid medical report with a full clinical description by a medical practitioner. This is actually referring to your the first medical report, which will be issued when the employee goes to see the doctor or to the hospital. For claims related to post-traumatic stress claims, a first medical report by a psychiatrist, which is a WCI-303, is required. Any other medical reports or comments, information should be provided which have an influence on the consideration of the liability of a claim. In the case of a needle prick, exposure to blood injuries by health workers, a pathologist reports is required for that. Okay, so documents required for reporting occupational disease. It's your duly completed employee's report of occupational disease, which is your WCI-1. Here again, it's also electronic or manual. a valid ID, identity information, also same with your, must be certified, either also a driver's license, passport, or birth certificate, or work permit. Notice of an accident and claim for compensation, which is your WCI 14, must be completed. Relevant questionnaires report related to the specific condition, if and where applicable. And then again, your first medical report from your health practitioners. And it must ensure that it has, the first medical report has to ensure that it includes a practice number. A biopsy or histology reports, results reports where necessary. Radiologist reports confirming diagnosis, chest X-ray reports, a lung function test in the case of a lung condition, laboratory investigations confirming the diagnosis. In case of a nose-induced hearing loss, then we'll need the audiograms, which is also a pre-employment report from your medical service a practitioner that you attend, an exposure report to diagnostic audiograms, which is for your ear, nose, and throat specialist report. It's from an ENT when necessary. A full medical report detailing symptoms and signs and a specific diagnosis, together with reports of any special investigations that support the diagnosis, together with detail of treatment administered, which could be and or planned, that you will require. Okay, the site has been changed since I think about a year now, or maybe more. That's the website that you go to register, which is your compeasy.labour.gov.za. The system can be accessed only by users registered to the relevant employer. Therefore, only users registered on CompEasy, but a particular employee can report new claims and follow up on progress of the claims. The registration of users must be done online, and the application will be vetted by officials of the compensation fund. If you do not intend registering yourself, you can appoint someone else to do that on your behalf. HR Talk also assist with this registrations and complete the process by attaching your documents and providing you with a claim number. You need to report the incidents within 7 to 14 days. Okay, the following documents we will need if you require HR Talk to assist in this process. We will need the following documents, but also if you're registering as an employer yourself and you go through that website, the following documents will be required, which is your CIPC documents, proof of business residence, the proof of director, proof of residence of designated people, ID of director, which must be certified in the last 3 months, completed user nomination form. This is also available on their website, or if you require one, you can contact us and we'll gladly send that to you. And an ID of user, it's also must be certified within the last 3 months. If you do not attach all these documents when you are doing the registration, the commissioner will send you an email to reject your registration. So ensure that all the documents are attached when you're registering on the CompEasy site, according to their requirements, and you await approval. So the email address that you do add onto the system, you wait for approval from the commissioner to give you access, they will give you a username and password to access the system to lodge the claim. This usually takes about 5 to 7 working days, but unfortunately due to lockdown and there is a huge backlog, this may not happen within 5 to 7 working days. It might take longer. But there will be an email sent through the email that you provided to say that you have been approved access or either rejected, and they will state the rejection if the document, it's most likely the documents were not in order or your ID were not certified in the last 3 months. So just make sure all that is attached and up to date. So that's from our side. Yes, HR can assist with the registering. What we do register you as an employer. We do request a user and we lodge the claim for you and provide you with a claim number, which you can use for future. The claim number usually goes to the medical practitioners or hospitals that the employee attended, which they use to load their claims and receive payment on their side. Thank you. That's me from my side. If there's any questions.
Okay, thank you, Harisha. To quickly go through the questions, is there a deadline for the payment of the 381 assessment amount for domestics? Okay, the deadline is effectively 30 days from the date of assessment. Now, remember, the legislation came in November 2020. It's critical that people who are employing domestics are registered before it's time to do your return of earnings in March, April, May 2022. So it's knowing how bad the administration is at the Compensation Commissioner, I would get that registration in as soon as possible. As soon as the registration is in, they will send you the provisional assessments of 381, or if your assessment is more, whatever the higher figure is, and you've got 30 days to pay that. If COID covers a loss of earnings, does the employer still pay? No, the COID will take over the payments of that person, obviously, while they're in that condition. Hilton, what is the process to claim back the 3 months paid to the employee initially? Harisha, can you answer that one?
Sure. So when we lodge the claim, as I said, you get the claim number, so you have full access to the claim. You can go in and attach the employee's probably pay slips or whatever proof you have to say that the employee was paid. You attach that to the claim. And when your claim gets processed, then obviously the commissioner will have a look at that and make payment to you. This, however, does take a while to receive, but that's how you'll just have to attach any proof of payments on that claim.
Okay, thank you, Harisha. And then Inga, the slides will be distributed to everyone in the next hour. And if you want to obviously listen to the webinar again, all of our webinars are on our website. They're also on YouTube. So yeah, you're welcome to look at it any time. And then just in closing, if you've got any registrations, or you want to use someone efficient in Johannesburg to deal with your registration, please contact me. And then our admin team are responsible for the submission of the return of earnings. So you're effectively dealing with 3 different people. You're dealing with me for registrations. You're dealing with my admin team, which you can obviously still deal through me for the return of earnings. And then Harisha and her team deal with the actual registration of the claims. Well, I hope you've learned something. You're welcome to send in more questions if you've got. And we do these webinars every Wednesday. So feel free to log on and learn something every week. Thank you so much for your time. Have a lovely day. Sorry, I have been told there is 2 more questions. I'm just going to look now. Are non-permanent employees covered? Fixed-term contracts? My advice to you, anyone who is working for you, put them on workman's compensation. It's a small price to pay. Although workman's compensation say volunteers shouldn't be covered, I would put them in. You do not want a situation where that person is volunteering or maybe getting a small stipend to assist you, and something happens to them and you get dragged into a civil claim. So I would include people, definitely people on fixed-term contracts, because they are employees. Sibongile, I don't understand. You said the person cannot claim after the diagnosis. Yeah, I think what Arisha was saying is you've got a certain amount of time to lodge the claim. Arisha, is that correct?
Yes, Dave, agree. It's within the specified time frame that you are eligible to have supporting documents for the occupational disease. And obviously you'll have to, sorry?
So you can't come 2 years after the fact and say, I got sick working at this company. If you haven't notified them and you haven't had a diagnosis within the stipulated time.
Yes.
Excellent. Any more questions? Is that it? H. LaRue, the recording, just please, it will be on our website. It can also be distributed if you want. Well, I think that's all. Thanks, folks. Second time logging out. Look forward to chatting to you again soon. Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye.